Hells yeah. So it's finally time. We're back. We're back in action. We got the engine, or we got the short block back from Tim. It looks fantastic. I got some up close footage for you guys. We also got the heads back from RGR/JPC. They did a really great job working with me to do some additional machining work, so I highly appreciate it. I mean, we're ready to put this back together. We got everything we need. Dad just flew in last night. It's currently Friday, so we have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday to put this back together. Tuesday, we head to the dyno to get the custom tunes done for the 93 tune, the E85 tune, and the 100 octane tune. As you can see, we got a can of Sunoco G260 GT Plus to run with the 100. So we're gonna do dyno runs with all three to compare power numbers, see what we're looking like. Sean at AED will be doing that tuning, so we're super excited. So now today, the goal is to hopefully get this long block put back together, or mostly put back together. So the entire short block was reassembled 100% by Tim at MPR Racing, so that is good to go. The heads they have the valves, the valve springs, all that kind of stuff, but the cams are not installed, nor are the lifters or anything like that. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna prep. We gotta do a couple things to the block, like put some sensors and things on it, and the oil filter, or the oil pump, we're gonna put that on, and then we're gonna go ahead and install the heads and start working on those, and then reinstalling the camshafts and all that kind of stuff. And we'll walk through some interesting things. I don't plan for this to be a step-by-step video, one, because we'll be here all day long. It's gonna be a really time-consuming process, but we will walk through some of the more interesting things we find as we put it back together, call out any insights or anything like that, kind of point out maybe where we made some changes and some deviations to the way we're putting it back together compared to maybe some other people. But we'll keep you guys updated. So as I mentioned, we're going to get started by putting a couple sensors on. We got some sensors up here to install, and some other things like that. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'll check back in with you right before we put the heads on. Heads on the engine, we've gone ahead and installed the oil pump and installed the sensors here on the top. So next step is to start putting the heads on, and then we can start working on getting the camshafts installed and working on the valve timing and all that, or the camshaft timing and stuff. So what we did here to prep putting the heads on is we went ahead and made sure there's no debris here in the cylinders. We put some degreaser to make sure that we don't have any debris or any grime in here, and clean that off. And then right before we put the heads on, we're going to put a bead of oil around here just to lubricate things, slap the head on, tighten it down. So once we drop a head on and we start tightening down, we'll show you what we're doing with the ARP bolts, the ARP studs. They have very, very specific instructions on the order, the torque, all that kind of stuff. So we'll cover that once we get it on. Right over there, we're taking on the heads, and we're degreasing and cleaning where the head studs come through, and then you sink the nut down to the seat, so making sure those are all nice and clean. So I want to make sure, because this is getting sealed up, that all surfaces are clean, there's no debris, and everything's as pure and clean as we can get it. All right, so we're ready here to put the ARP lube on, and then begin to tighten down the nuts onto the studs. So we want to make sure we got to get the ARP lube on the seat here, where the nut goes down onto the washer, and then as well as on the threads. Then for the pattern, we're going to start in the middle, top here, then go to the bottom, then go to the right, then the left, and kind of keep working your way, crisscrossing back and forth. The first phase will be 70 foot-pounds, and then you'll go up to 100 foot-pounds for the second. All right, so we're ready now to start putting the cams in. So we've tilted the engine here vertical so that we have less likelihood of the cams dropping out of the engine. First thing we need to do is we need to put in the lash adjusters here, and then put in the followers on top of that. Those need to go in before that we put the cams in, so we're going to go ahead and do that right now. Alright guys, so we're here looking at the service manual, looking at how we need to align the cams, and if you see here, it'll show you these little D-slots on the ends of the camshafts, and you want to make sure you align these in the directions the arrows are facing. This will make it easier when we go to put the cam phasers on. They'll make sure that they're in the right alignment, and they'll slip on correctly, and our timing will be in the right. And then once we go ahead and do that, or I should say before we go ahead and do that, we need to make sure that we get everything coated here in assembly lube. So we've gone in into all the journals and coated them in assembly lube, as well as we're going to coat the area the lobes and all that good stuff. Basically, all the surfaces of the cam in assembly lube. That way, everything is nice and lubed up and good and slippery while the engine builds oil pressure for the first time, and just help it, do the initial burn-in. All right, now that we have the camshafts in, we've bolted them down. We've used these, new ARP studs. Nothing crazy, nothing unique here. We've gone ahead and bolted everything in. It's time to put the cam phasers here on the end. So as you can see, we have the D-rings lined up like we had talked about in the service manual. So the next thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go get the cam phasers and align them correctly on the right part of the chain, and then slip them on the ends here. So looking at the service manual here, you'll see that what we want to do is we want to take the chain and put it and align it so that the dashes on the back side of the cam phasers line up with the single marker and then the double link marker on the back. All right, and that's what it looks like down here. So as you can see, we have the single here and the double over there, and then this is ready to get flipped up and put onto the end of the cam phasers. All right, just to show you guys what I'm talking about. So this particular phaser is fully seated on the cam here. You can tell because if you look in there, you can see the holes. But if we come over here to this one, you can just see, if I can get the light for you guys correctly, there you go. You can just see the edge of the hole. So the cams are out of sync with each other right now. So what we found to work, because we were not smart and bought the tool to allow you to turn the camshaft up here. You could use a giant crescent wrench, but apparently I don't have one big enough. So what we're doing is we're installing one of the phasers on and then rotating this gear here, and that allows us to get the cams in phase. It does take a bit of muscle, so I recommend using a crescent wrench. All right, guys, so we skipped a couple steps, mostly because doing the timing on this thing is just, this is a real bitch. So there's just a lot of intricacies. Once you know what you're doing and you're comfortable with it, it's really not too bad. But there's, we just ran into a few snags where we got either out of order or things just didn't quite go together smoothly as we wanted to. And given how much work has gone into this engine, all that kind of stuff, we decided to kind of double check, triple check, quadruple check, just every little thing you could imagine. So just to very, very quickly recap how this works. There are other videos on YouTube which I can link to if you guys are interested, on how to cam or how to set the timing on a Coyote. It's really, follow those videos. It's better than what I could show you. They're more concise. The people are more prepared and they're less concerned with everything going kaboom. So I would highly recommend you check those videos out. But specifically for the Voodoo, what's important is this is not set up to be timed, so we've spun it around a whole bunch of times, so if it looks weird, ignore that part. But this little key here, when you first want to start, you start with the left-hand side, the driver's side, and then you get all that set up. As you can see, it's behind the passenger side / right-hand side on the sprocket. So you start with this side, then you go to that side. The first thing you do is you put these on with the secondary chain on. You get the cams in sync, as I mentioned earlier. Once they're in sync, you've bolted everything down, you've tightened everything, then you put this chain on, then you put these on, and then put the tensioner on. But where you want this to be is you want this to be at 1230, so not perfectly straight up, just a little bit cocked to the side here. And then you want this left hand, this ironically is in the right spot for this video, but this you want to be kind of in a perfect line. So you know, if you look at this as a plane, let me get the camera in the right spot. If you look at this as a plane, kind of as the way the cylinder or the way the pistons are moving, you want this hash mark to be pointed that direction. You then link up, or then you align with this link up here, and there's a blue link that you line with the right here. Tighten it all down, then you turn this back counterclockwise to 9:30 o'clock, so that's about right here going that way. And you do the exact same thing. So you make sure the R dash here is pointed that way, and then you reassemble everything. So it's a little different than a Coyote. So to keep that in mind, that if you're working on a Voodoo with a flat plane crank, you cannot align this. You cannot set the timing the same way you'd set Coyote timing. Very bad idea. If you're working on a 5.2 liter with a cross plane, it's also going to be different. So keep that in mind. This is just for the 5.2. But we decided not to video that one because it took about 3 hours. By the time we messed around, we had to run to the store, get some tools. So some important things to keep in mind. One, when you go to put these on, when you go to put the cam phasers on, the easiest way to do it is get the, at least in my experience, is to get the intake one on first, slide it in, it'll slide into the slot, and then, so get that one in, and then get a big crescent wrench if you can, or something similar, and get on these flat spots on the cam here. Grab it and rotate it. That will give you the flexibility you need, because you can't, because of the tension, because of the valve springs, these both won't slip right on. One will be able to slip on, and then one will need to be turned about, I would say, yay much. Just a tiny little bit of a turn. So what you want is you want to get a crescent wrench on here, twist, then this one will go slide right on, and then you might need to readjust so that your hash mark is in the proper spot per the instructions. I really recommend, if you're going to be messing with the timing on your Voodoo or your Coyote, buy a service manual. There are a lot of steps. It's probably a total of 20-25 steps. Someone experienced might disagree and feel like it's really easy and anybody can do it if you watch a video. There's just a lot of little detail that I've never seen a video that walks through it enough. So please, I recommend you buy a service manual. Walks you through it step by step, makes it very hard to mess up. Assuming you're good at reading and not like me and accidentally skip a step or two. So where we're at now, the engine, or I should say the motor is fully timed, the timing is set up, so everything's good. It should be good. We turned it over by hand, probably about 20 rotations, and didn't get any valve contact, valve to piston contact. It's not for sure because it's not primed, so as many of you know, the VCT system uses oil, the lifter uses oil, and the tensioners use oil to work. So without that oil in the system priming it, it won't be at max lift, it won't be at max tension, all that kind of stuff. So it's not a perfect thing, but it's about as good as we can do without actually trying to put it in the car, put oil pressure to it, and spin it over again. So we're pretty confident. Things look good. Next steps for us. So it's pretty late tonight, and our goal was to get the engine sealed up so it's free from elements. So our plan is to just go through the heads again, double check, that all the lifters and lash adjusters are in the right spot. Nothing got misplaced. Nothing got sucked under or anything. We did realize that when we were putting on the driver's or passenger side here, one of these followers had fallen off of the lash adjuster and slid down a little bit. So fortunately we caught that before we tried to go ahead and start the engine. But it's important, you double check that kind of stuff on your own. Just, always double, triple check. A lot can go wrong on the top end of these motors. So now that we've got it timed up and everything's good on the front, we're going to put the front engine cover on, we're going to put the oil pan on, and then we're going to do what we need to do on the front end to be able to drop the valve covers on. That will seal up the engine. That means we won't get any contaminants inside, hopefully, and everything will be good to go. Then that'll be our breaking point for tonight. And then tomorrow we'll be getting up again and finishing dressing the motor and getting it ready to go. That'll end this video, and then the next video will be getting the engine off the stand, back onto the K-member over there, the front engine cradle, and then we'll be good to go. All right, so we're gonna get started on this stuff. We'll update you as we go and provide any insight if we can. All right, got the front cover on. That's all buttoned up. So the next thing for us to do is rotate the engine upside down, install the front. Okay. All right, now that we got the front cover on, the next thing to do is rotate the engine upside down and install the oil pan. Some things to keep in mind with the oil pan is on the bottom of the oil pump here, it's gonna be a little hard to see, but you have this O-ring, so it's important to lubricate this with oil before you install the oil pan. The other thing interesting about the oil pan is the pickup is actually integrated into the composite. And so you want to lubricate this as well before you slide this up in there. So we're gonna go ahead and flip it upside down, install this, get this all sealed up and installed. And then the last thing for us to do tonight is actually gonna be install the valve covers so we can get everything nice and sealed up and protected, so we don't have to worry about contaminants getting inside and wrecking things for us. So we're gonna go ahead and do that, and we'll check in with you in a minute. All right, guys, it is the next morning. So as I mentioned last night, we ended off with essentially working to get the engine sealed up. That way we didn't have to worry about contaminants and debris and other things getting inside. So that's all done, and we're now ready to start putting the accessory drive on. We're going to do a cylinder leak down test just to verify and have base numbers for how all the cylinders are doing, as well as once we get in the car and we start it up the first time and get everything rock and roll, and then we'll do a compression test and see what compression numbers are. And that way, when I go to do this type of maintenance later on in the year, just to see how things are wearing, we'll have a good idea of how the engine's wearing in, performing, and we'll have some good base numbers to work off of. So we're going to go ahead and get started on putting the accessory drive stuff on. So it's going to be the water pump up front, the alternator, that kind of stuff, as well as I'll put the engine mounts on the side, go through all that, and I'll check in with you guys if anything's interesting there. All right, guys, it's the next morning, so we've gone ahead and for the most part, put all the front engine dress up and all the accessory drives and all that kind of stuff on the front. So we're now ready to lift this up off the engine stand and drop it onto the K-member. Nothing unique here. This is all pretty basic stuff. It's all covered in the service manual. It's all really straightforward. Just start putting things on in the order as described. Use the appropriate blue Loctite and make sure things stay nice and tight. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go get this on the engine lift it up so we can remove the engine stand, and then we're going to slide the K-member over here underneath it and then drop it back down. Alright, guys, it is the end of day 2 and we have everything mostly together. So one thing I wanted to cover really quick here is going to be how to put the transmission on. So this clutch alignment tool that I'm holding in my hand, this works for the standard Coyote. It does not work for the GT350. When I called the Ford dealer, they told me they're not even able to order the tool for us. So the way we went ahead and did it is we actually just got a socket that fit into the end of the crankshaft, a 3/8 inch extension, covered it in duct tape, and used that to basically make our own clutch alignment tool. It worked great, didn't have any problems with it. A little bit of redneck engineering, but that's to be expected. All right, guys, so we got everything reassembled. Engine's completely buttoned up, headers are on. We're now ready to slide this underneath the car and drop the car back down on top of it. Some interesting notes for you guys. So we did not use the bolts that came with the ARH headers. We actually bought some ARP bolts that I'll put in the link, but even with the ARH bolts, or the headers that came with the kit / the ARP bolts, we had to chase all of the threads with a tap because we were getting so much resistance. We think it was just because of the way they're machined in the factory, that the thread needed to be a little deeper, because we didn't change the pitch, we didn't change the diameter of the bolt hole or anything like that. It just was giving us a lot of resistance. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're doing this yourself, there's a pretty good chance you'll need to chase those. Otherwise, you'll be fighting a lot of resistance. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to slide this underneath the car and start to drop the car down in and reload everything and put this back in the car. We'll update you guys with any insights or any particulars that we run into. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed what I could get of the time lapse. Unfortunately, the camera died on me in the middle of it because it took so long, and it took us about an hour and a half, 2 hours to get this up back into the car, mostly because we started to lift it up and then we realized that the steering column was tucked up inside the frame rail. It was on the inside of the engine bay. It was sitting about right up here, and unfortunately, due to the header design, you're not able to get that back down. So we had to drop everything back down, fish it through first. So the first thing we did was make sure the steering column was coming straight down in this hole here, and that allowed it to pass through the header safely, and we cleared that. So once we did that, then we were able to finish up and lift this back up. The other thing that was a real challenge for us, if I can let me get some light for you. The other thing that was a real challenge for us is if you look in there, you'll see the oil lines. Those were a real bitch for us because just the nature of the access getting in there. Unfortunately, if you connect to the engine first and then you run to your remote oil filter, at least where I chose, the access to there was shit with the heads in the way. So there wasn't really an efficient way to do that. So we found out this worked. We just had to use combination of side access, underneath access, and over here access. So that was a real bitch, and that took a long time. So between those two things, it took us about 2 hours to get the engine in and get it bolted down. Once that was done, we went ahead and started connecting the wiring back up, the brake lines back up, and all that kind of good stuff that you have to do to drop it. We also got the drive shaft in. No real surprises with the drive shaft here. The QA1 carbon fiber shaft is exactly what you would expect. It goes right in. It's easy to work with. The instruction is very clear, and fitment was perfect. So highly recommend. No surprises. And then regarding the ARH long system here we have the full system with the exception of the mufflers. So they call it the long systems. That means you have the long tubes, the mid pipes, the X pipe, and then you have a point where you connect to your OEM mufflers. So I chose to go with these because I wanted to be able to retain the more silenced, quiet mode, if you will, of the stock system. I don't know if I'll stick with it yet. I don't know how it'll sound in person. So the plan is to run those for a while, see how we like it, and if we just don't need quiet mode, then we'll probably go with the full system and add their mufflers. But if you're going with their long system, you do need to make cuts with your OEM mufflers. So you'll see here, we've gone ahead and made the cuts. We just installed the full system on the car for the full ARH system, measured where they got to, and then compared that to these and just made the cut. So these should go right in, bolt right up. Hold on to your butts. Just came up. Oil pressure took a couple minutes or a couple seconds to come up. Woo!